decade in the nuclear industry. Matt worked tirelessly with us, I think on both sides of the aisle, actually, and with the minority staff as well, in order to move the ADVANCE Act through the Senate into the President's desk, which was signed into law a month or two ago. No other commissioner has the unique and credible and valuable set of credentials that Matt possesses. I strongly believe that he would be and will be, if confirmed, a tremendous asset to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as it implements this critical bipartisan law, which we all voted for. I believe, as do many of us here, that we are at a crucial moment for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the future of nuclear energy. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is most effective and efficient when it has a full slate of commissioners to carry out its mission and provide certainty to the industry. With all of this in mind, I'm pleased to support Matt's nomination. I urge all of our colleagues to do the same. Second, the committee is considering the nomination of Matt Kaplan be the federal co-chair of the Great Lakes Authority. The Great Lakes Authority will promote economic development, domestic manufacturing, and job creation while restoring and protecting the Great Lakes. It will provide grant funding to clean energy projects as well as water and broadband infrastructure projects. In March of this year, Congress appropriated funding for the Great Lakes Authority for the first time. Mr. Kaplan will be responsible for standing up this brand new regional commission, and I believe he is up for the challenge. And finally, we will consider a number of resolutions to approve General Services Administration prospectuses throughout our country. It is our committee's responsibility to approve these prospectuses before Congress can approve funds for these projects. Members have had the opportunity to review these documents, and I believe the resolutions are non-controversial. With that, I'm pleased to recognize the ranking member, Senator Capito, for any remarks that she has this morning. Good morning.
Thank you, Chairman Carper, for holding this hearing, and thanks for the witnesses that are coming before us today. I am pleased that the business meeting, October 11th, marked the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Energy Reorganization Act of 1974. And this landmark law was a turning point in how our nation approached nuclear safety issues. In establishing the NRC, Congress preserved the Atomic Energy Commission's basic structure, 5 commissioners sharing equal responsibility to oversee the civilian use of nuclear power and radioactive materials. This 5-member commission structure has served this country well. Each member contributes through their diverse background and experience. Previous nominees to serve as NRC commissioners have had exemplary careers leading large organizations in the legal field, deep policy backgrounds, or impressive scientific and technical credentials. Each diverse perspective making the value of the commission greater than the sum of each member. The commissioners are responsible for leading the organization, making regulatory decisions, and setting policy. Given the crossroads that the NRC is facing and the nuclear industry, and Congress's clear interest in changing the agency's culture from the status quo, it is imperative that we take into consideration the breadth and depth of this nominee's background. I believe that the White House has sort of exaggerated Mr. Marzano's experience in the nuclear energy industry, although I do recognize his training and time working at a power plant. As I stated at his confirmation hearing, demonstrating a capacity to follow procedures is fundamentally different than a commissioner's role in setting policy, promulgating regulations, and adjudicating significant legal issues. We must consider the totality of Mr. Marzano's background and depth of his experience, particularly at this moment of tremendous importance. The overwhelming passage of the ADVANCE Act was a clear message from Congress that the NRC, with the leadership, support, and direction of the Commission, can and should do better to enable the safe use of nuclear technologies. Despite this clear direction, Chair Hansen has stated that he views the ADVANCE Act as an endorsement of the work that the agency is already doing, communicating his position to the staff, the NRC licensees and applicants, and to Congress that the status quo is acceptable. And it appears that the NRC staff has followed the Commissioner's lead. The NRC staff's recommendation to update the agency's mission statement, as the ADVANCE Act requires the Commission to do, rationalized really doing just the bare minimum to comply with the law. Those recommendations missed the mark, and I expect the entire Commission will unanimously support a more ambitious mission statement than the lackluster staff paper. The Advance Act was not an endorsement of the status quo. After considering Mr. Marzano's responses to my questions for the record, I do not have confidence that he has the necessary background and experience to be that agent of change at the Commission, or to set the Commission up for the agency's next 50 years as Congress just envisioned in the Advance Act. So I will be voting no on Mr. Marzano's nomination. As Congress continues to consider the candidates for this vacancy, we must do this. The Commission must continue to work efficiently. As the chairman mentioned, we have 53 resolutions, GSA resolutions before us. I'll ask my colleagues to support these. There is one in there for West Virginia, perspective for repairs and alterations to the IRS Enterprise Computing Center in Martinsburg, West Virginia. The approval of this perspectives will allow for much-needed improvements to the roofing system and other upgrades necessary for the building's continued operations. We certainly do not want anybody's tax return to get lost or missed or changed because we have not modernized our IRS computing system. I also will be supporting Matthew Kaplan to be the federal co-chairperson of the Great Lakes Authority. I've heard very positive feedback on him. So thank you, and I yield back to the chair.
Senator Kaplan, thank you for those comments, and thanks for working with us, you and your team working with us, getting us ready for what is going to be a busy and a full day. If I'm not mistaken, I believe we have a voting quorum present. And as we proceed, I would ask senators to please hold your statements until after voting is completed. And I now call up presidential nomination 1694 for Matthew Kaplan of Maryland to be federal co-chairman of the Great Lakes Authority. I move to approve and report the nomination favorably to the Senate. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The nominee is favorably reported. And I note for the record that a quorum of the committee is present. I call up and move.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I call up now and move to approve en bloc the 53 committee resolutions for the prospectuses listed in the notice for this business meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. These resolutions are approved. Good. And Senator Padilla, thank you for joining us today. You're recognized for your remarks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, just want to take a moment to register some disappointment that my bipartisan, bicameral Wildlife Corridors bill with Senators Hoeven and Congressman Zinke were not included in today's markup, despite the overwhelming support from the wildlife conservation community and the sportsmen's and hunting groups in a number of states. It was almost a year ago that I held a subcommittee hearing to receive testimony from wildlife experts on the challenges and solutions to facilitating wildlife migration. We heard overwhelming support for codifying a Trump-era secretarial order on wildlife movement, which is what my bill would effectively do. Together, we worked with private landowners, state wildlife agencies, and sportsmen's groups and crafted a bill that would build off the success of that secretarial order and further encourage voluntary efforts. Let me emphasize voluntary efforts to support wildlife movement, particularly for big game species. And earlier this year, Representative Zinke, who sponsors the companion bill in the House and issued the secretarial order when he was Interior Secretary during the Trump administration, provided compelling testimony for the bill during a House Natural Resources Committee hearing where it received bipartisan praise. This bill remains a high priority for prominent sportsmen and wildlife groups such as Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, the Boone and Crockett Club, the Congressional Sportsman Foundation, and the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, as well as for the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, which represents our state wildlife agencies. I've tried to negotiate in good faith and to be very accommodating to my colleagues on the other side of the dais. I have to say, though, Mr. Chairman, it was a little frustrating that we couldn't get to a final yes and a final agreement on language. So I raise this in the hopes that in the coming weeks that we can continue our efforts across the aisle. I ask that my colleagues across the aisle continue to work with me in good faith to advance this common sense bipartisan bill. There's still time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Padilla, thank you very much for those comments. And Senator Cardin, you're recognized, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you are approving the nominee on the Great Lakes, it just reminds me of the work of this committee and being so proud to be on this committee. You and I are in our last couple weeks on the Environment and Public Works Committee.
I don't know about you, Ben, but almost every day, even on the train coming down today, people said, "How do you like being retired?" I said, "Well, if you want to know the truth, I'm not." If you looked at my schedule today, you'd say, "Well, he should be paid overtime." It is a very full day, as my colleagues.
Right. I don't think we envisioned when we made our announcements that we were not seeking re-election, that we would have such a busy end to our term, but
You find that people have just been incredibly kind to you back home?
yes.
It's amazing.
People who have never voted for me tell me that they like me, so it's been
I'd known, Shelley, if I'd known people were going to be this nice to me, I would have quit a lot sooner.
I don't know if I'll agree with that statement, but I just really wanted to compliment our chair and ranking member. It's helpful to have the chair and ranking member in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and I just marvel at the way that we've been able to work together in a bipartisan manner in this committee. And I know there are days we have some differences, but by and large, we have worked as a team. I think about that on the Water Resources Development Act. I think on that on so many bills that have moved through this committee that are now the law of the land that have benefited all of our states in a way that is consistent with the mission of this committee. So I just really wanted to take a moment, if I might, to just thank our Senator Carper and Senator Capito. You have continued the great tradition of this committee. I sought to get on this committee in my first year in the United States Senate. It's a committee I asked to serve on, and it's a committee that I've been very proud to be part of. And so I can name a lot of different aspects that we've been able to move forward, and I just think that the legacy of this committee is tremendous, and it's been an honor to serve on the committee. But congratulations to our two leaders.
Thank you for those kind words. It's an honor to be your neighbor. We sit next to each other on two committees, and he's my neighbor right across the bay. So what an honor. Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
Mr. Chairman.
My friend from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you and I, we met 42 years ago when you were a freshman.
We were in kindergarten, I think.
You were a young man, a freshman congressman, and I, at that point, was in my fourth term in Congress 42 years ago. And I always felt that he was one of the most talented young people that I had ever met in politics. And so I invited then young Congressman Tom Carper to go with me on a congressional delegation that I had organized down to Nicaragua and El Salvador. And I was also taking with me Ted Sorensen, who had been the advisor for President Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Stansfield Turner, who had been Jimmy Carter's head of the CIA, who had been his expert, President Carter's expert, on Cuba and Latin American affairs as well. And it was at the height of the battle between the Sandinistas and the Somosistas in Nicaragua. It was also at a point where the war in El Salvador was at a peak, and we were unfortunately financing the generals, who were in control of the death squads in El Salvador. And so it was helpful for me because I had Ted Sorensen and Stansfield Turner with me to give me their insights, but also to be talking to President Duarte in El Salvador, and unbelievably, still true, new President Ortega. He had just taken over in Nicaragua. And these two leaders, along with Tom Carper, were just so helpful in having a meaningful congressional delegation going to that region, which was troubled. To a certain extent, we still see the results of those wars in the migration patterns, even in the governmental structures in those countries. But that's where my friendship with Senator Carper began, and my admiration for him is undiminished over the years, including the passage of historic legislation under his leadership of this committee, which is going to make a mark on our country for decades to come. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your great leadership and for your friendship over all of these years.
Thank you. And I would just say, people say, what do you most remember from those trips? I remember riding in CIA helicopters into contra camps right along the border with Nicaragua and El Salvador, and it was a very tender moment for our country in that part of the world. One of the reasons, and there's a connection here with what we're talking about here today, we need a full complement on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We need for the NRC to be able to do their job, continue to do their job, especially with a focus on safety. I was a Navy ROTC midshipman and a lot of years in the Navy. So was Senator Kelly, and I've been a believer that nuclear energy is not the whole answer, but it's a big part of the answer. If we're serious about addressing climate change and global warming, nuclear has to play a part of it. It's got to be safe. It's got to be safe. Well, if we screw it up, if we mess it up, then heaven help us with respect to actually addressing climate change. So and if we want to make sure that the folks from Honduras and Nicaragua and those countries literally stay there and where they can actually raise crops and not have to worry about weather and drought, there is actually a connection here. Go ahead. Senator Kelly, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I certainly want to associate myself with the remarks of Senator Markey, and thank you for your service. I don't know if you remember when we first met or what the circumstances were. I do. For some reason, this young congresswoman from Arizona, after being elected, decided to strike up a friendship with you. You were her, my wife Gabby's, sort of like, she looked at you as like the mentor in the Senate.
What like a grandfather, I think.
Grandfather, yes. Grandfather in the Senate for her, and she's always been incredibly fond of you. And then, for me to have the opportunity to serve on this committee under your leadership for the last 3.5 years has been a great experience for me, but also because of your career and especially the Navy part. We both had the opportunity to serve our country in the U.S. Navy, the finest fighting force on earth, even ahead of the other ones here in the U.S., in my opinion. But to have this opportunity to serve with you has been a great honor for me, and I want to thank you for your service to this country.
Yeah, thank you, and give Gabby our best, please. Thank you very much. With that, I think we're ready. With that, if you're ready for this one, I want to call up presidential nomination number 1980 for Matthew James Marzano of Illinois to be a member of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for a term of 5 years expiring on June 30th, 2028. I move to approve and report the nomination favorably to the Senate. Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Bozeman.
No by proxy?
Mrs. Capito.
No.
Mr. Carden.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy?
Mr. Fetterman. Mr. Graham.
No by proxy?
Mr. Kelly. Aye. Ms. Lemons.
No by proxy?
Mr. Markey. Aye. Mr. Merkley. Aye. Mr. Mullen.
No by proxy?
Mr. Padilla. Aye. Mr. Ricketts.
No.
Mr. Sanders. Aye. Ms. Stabenow. Aye. Mr. Sullivan.
No by proxy?
Mr. Whitehouse. Aye. Mr. Wicker.
No by proxy?
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Chairman, the yeas are 10 and nays are 9.
The nominee is favorably reported. And I just want to thank everyone for being here. I especially want to thank Senator Fetterman for changing his schedule and turning his day on. And thank you so much. And everybody else. And Senator Capito, you didn't have to be this cooperative. Thank you so much for being just the wonderful colleague and partner that you've been for all these years. And with that, that concludes the committee's votes for the business meeting today, and I want to thank again everyone for your participation. I will now recognize members who would like to speak on any other items on which we have voted or about to vote today. And let me recognize again Senator Padilla. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, too, just wanted to briefly join the chorus of our colleagues. Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I promised to be brief here,
Yeah, okay.
but I too wanted to join the chorus of my colleagues in thanking you for your service, for your leadership of this committee, and for your outreach to me when I first arrived in the Senate. You were not just one of the first members, but one of the first chairs of a committee I was appointed to serve on, to reach out and say, how can I help you? How can we work together? So I've always appreciated that. You reminded me of the impact that one of my predecessors, Senator Boxer, had on this very committee, which she chaired once upon a time as ranking member for a few years, and the importance of California's voice on this committee. I thought I was the only one that you would share an occasional story of your time in the Navy with, your trips with your thumb stuck out across America, your first visit with some of your friends here to Washington, D.C. when they went off to meet women and you came to visit the Capitol and witness some of the committee proceedings. I thought those were just exclusively shared with me, but clearly you've enjoyed sharing some of that history and those experiences with you. I also appreciate you letting me know every time you come to California, which you still do on a very regular basis, your appreciation for my state, which has helped me then advocate for some of the California issues with you and with our colleagues here in committee. But among the things I'm most appreciative of is how well you always welcomed and greeted my kids when they come to the Capitol. I've shared with you some of the pictures from over the years of you shaking hand. You made a big impression on them, and for that I'll always be grateful. So thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. When you talk to your kids later today or this weekend, please convey our thanks to them and your wife for sharing you with all of us.
I appreciate it.
Barbara Boxer has said to me more than a few times that you are a most worthy successor to her, and she's right. She's right. Okay. And now, all right. Senator Capito, anything else? Anything else you want to say? In closing, I again want to thank our members for being here with all of us today. And for some final housekeeping, I have 3 unanimous consent requests. First, I ask unanimous consent for members to submit their statements for the record on the items that we have considered today, without objection. Second, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a number of letters of support for the nominee and resolutions our committee approved today, without objection. And I also ask unanimous consent that the staff have authority to make technical and conforming changes to the resolutions approved today, without objection. I want to thank again everyone for your participation. Senator Capito, especially to thank you for your kindness and cooperation. And with that, the business meeting is adjourned.
Now I'll exchange. That's your hearing. That's your hearing.
I love baseball, as some of you know, and this is like a day-night doubleheader. And the day game is over, and we're about to turn on the lights and play the second half of the doubleheader. Good morning, everyone, again. I call this hearing to order, and we're gathered here today, as you know, to celebrate the anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which President Ford signed into law on December 16th, 1974. Today, we will reflect on the impact of the Safe Drinking Water Act and on the work that our committee has done to protect drinking water and to protect public health. This hearing is also an opportunity to discuss what improvements are needed moving forward to safeguard our nation's drinking water. Our work on the Safe Drinking Water Act is personal to me. Some of you may recall in the Bible, there's a verse. My mother, Senator Capita knows, my mother was West Virginia, Beckley, West Virginia. She used to drag us to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Thursday night, and on Wednesday nights. And one of the things she wanted to make sure that we internalized was not just the golden rule to treat other people the way you want to be treated, but also to make sure that we took a verse of scripture called Matthew 25, dealing with the least of these. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was thirsty, did you give me to drink? It's like right there in the Bible, Matthew 25. So something that's there. And the golden rule is in every major religion of the world. They're all in. Everyone, I don't care if you're Catholic, Jew, Muslim, Buddhist, it's in there for everybody, to treat other people the way we want to be treated. But for me, Matthew 25 and the golden rule are all things that basically say that Americans have, we want to make sure that all Americans have access to clean, safe, and reliable water services. For example, back in 2017, about 7 years ago, a small, we have three counties in Delaware, but in the southernmost county, in Sussex County, a small unincorporated community just outside of Millsboro, in the southern part of our state, reached out to me because their drinking water had become contaminated. I went and sat in the living room of one of the members of this community and heard personal stories of how children could not drink water out of their taps, families could not bathe, and overnight their property values plummeted. This small community, like so many across America, was dependent on well water. And growing up in West Virginia and Virginia later on, we used well water. That's where we got our water. Their challenges back in that small community in Millsboro, near Millsboro, the challenges led our team to start drafting the first in a series of significant drinking water reform bills over several Congresses, all with the goal of making sure every American has access to safe, clean, and reliable drinking water. And the Safe Drinking Water Act is a foundational federal law that enables us to strive toward that goal. To understand the significance of the Safe Drinking Water Act, it's important for us to recall the state of our nation's drinking water in the early 1970s. Before the Safe Drinking Water became law in 1974, the Safe Drinking Water Act became law in 1974, there was no comprehensive federal regulation protecting our nation's drinking water. In 1970, officials found that some 90% of surveyed drinking water systems were contaminated. Let me just say that again. Officials found that 90% of surveyed drinking water systems were contaminated. And between 1961 and 1970, state health departments, along with supplemental reports, documented nearly 50,000 cases of illness caused by waterborne disease in the United States, 50,000. As a result, Congress got to work. Congress got to work and passed the Safe Drinking Water Act in 1974. It would become the first federal law to provide a regulatory framework for protecting our nation's drinking water. Some of us may recall the Safe Drinking Water Act led to major federal investments in drinking water infrastructure during the 1970s and the 1980s, including the construction of much of our nation's drinking water infrastructure. These investments are also represented incredible progress for public health. Unfortunately, over the next few decades, federal investment did not keep pace with the needs of our communities. By 2017, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave our nation's aging drinking water infrastructure a grade of D as dog, a grade of D, estimating that there was a water main break every 2 minutes. That's every 2 minutes in America. In Congress, we recognize the need for significant investment in water infrastructure. And in 2018, this committee, and frankly in this room, this committee led the effort to pass America's Water Infrastructure Act, which reauthorized and updated the Safe Drinking Water Revolving Funds for the first time in more than 20 years. Then in 2021, this committee drafted the Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act. This bill served as a foundational piece of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which Senator Capito and I actually ended up managing on the Senate floor, one of the great honors, I think, for me, and I suspect for you in the time that I've served here, but which President Biden signed into law on November 15th, 2021, another anniversary that we just celebrated. And speaking of celebrations, it's actually today is also the President's birthday. How about that? In total, the bipartisan infrastructure law invested an unprecedented $55 billion to improve drinking water and wastewater systems in communities across our country. This remains the single largest water infrastructure investment in our nation's history. Those funds are going a long way toward protecting the health and protecting the well-being of Americans from coast to coast. For example, the city of Tucson, Arizona is using bipartisan infrastructure law funding to treat contaminated well water. The community of Hastings, Nebraska is using bipartisan infrastructure law funding to inventory lead service lines that the city will then replace. And the city of Newark, not to be confused with Newark, New Jersey, not to be confused with Newark, Delaware, is using bipartisan infrastructure law funding to evaluate the reliability of their sewer systems too. While the bipartisan infrastructure law has enabled us to make considerable progress, there are still challenges facing our communities that we must address. I've long said that the bipartisan infrastructure law was just a down payment on America's infrastructure needs. Today's hearing is not only an opportunity for us, bless you, it's not only an opportunity for us to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, but it is also a chance to chart a path forward to build and rebuild the 21st century water infrastructure that we need to ensure that all Americans have access to clean drinking water. We look forward to hearing from our distinguished panel of witnesses about this important topic. Before we do, I want us to hear from Senator Capito for any comments that she wants to make. Senator Capito, you're recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witnesses who are here today and our members who are here for this important meeting on the impacts, past impacts, and the future of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Many of the comments I'll make will jive with what the chairman has put forward. As we celebrate this 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, we must first recognize the remarkable progress that we have made in securing safe, reliable, and affordable water across the country. When Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water Act, contaminants in our drinking water pose serious threats and risks to Americans and our public health. After its enactment, the Safe Drinking Water Act drove a significant improvement in drinking water quality by establishing enforceable health standards, empowering states and water systems to monitor and manage water quality, and enabling the EPA to intervene when standards are not met. This framework has been instrumental in ensuring safe, reliable, and affordable drinking water for communities across the state. Despite these landmark achievements, we still have to recognize that more work lies ahead. First, in 2021, Congress made an unprecedented investment in and the chairman talked about this, nation's water infrastructure through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment in Jobs Act, IIJA. That investment gives us an opportunity to modernize our drinking water structure, strengthen resilience, and address disparities in water access. The funding particularly targets small and disadvantaged communities, aiming also to replace lead pipes, make important infrastructure upgrades such as upgrading our filtration systems, and addressing emerging threats like PFAS. Despite these significant investments and advancements, many rural and underserved communities still struggle to access federal resources due to complex processes. While the Safe Drinking Water Act framework offers the foundation for these communities to receive support, we must also focus on building local capacity, providing technical assistance, and addressing the pervasive challenge communities encounter across the EPA's various grant programs. Addressing these issues will empower communities to access needed resources, to upgrade their systems, and effectively protect our public health. Second, we must carefully implement Safe Drinking Water Act and IIJA programs in partnership with our state and local governments. Cooperative federalism, which is a principle enshrined in the Safe Drinking Water Act, recognizes that states are best positioned to understand, prioritize, and address the needs of their communities. Federal programs should complement these state programs rather than impose one-size-fits-all mandates that complicate funding processes and divert attention from pressing infrastructure needs. Third, the unprecedented level of funding provided for the IIJA demands rigorous oversight and accountability. As stewards of taxpayers' dollars, we must ensure that these funds are used effectively and transparently, monitoring EPA's administration of funds and maximizing the public health impact of each dollar that is spent. Congressional oversight is especially crucial as we work to address emerging contaminants such as PFAS or forever chemicals, which require careful regulatory approaches that balance scientific rigor with practical feasibility for water systems nationwide. PFAS presents unique challenges because of its persistence in the environment. The EPA's proposal to classify certain PFAS as hazardous substances under CERCLA, though well-intentioned, would impose financial penalties on utilities that are tasked with cleaning up PFAS that they did not create and forcing unfair costs onto our local governments and ratepayers. To address this, Congress must exempt these entities, or they're called passive receivers, from CERCLA liability while holding manufacturers and primary contributors accountable. This balanced, science-based approach will allow water systems to prioritize their efforts on providing clean water. As we look to the future, the legacy of the Safe Drinking Water Act reminds us of the power of bipartisan cooperation, sound science, and shared responsibility across federal, state, and local governments. These values have been central to the Act's success and will continue to guide our efforts to strengthen and protect our nation's drinking water systems. As we focus on practical, evidence-based solutions, we honor the Act's spirit and renew our commitment to safe, reliable, and affordable drinking water for all Americans. In closing, I want to thank all of our federal, state, and local partners and the water professionals who work tirelessly to keep our water safety systems running safely. I look forward to our discussion today and working to advance our shared mission to protect and enhance America's drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Capito. And let me now recognize Senator Kelly, who's going to introduce our distinguished witness from the Navajo Nation. Senator Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to welcome to the committee the President of the Navajo Nation, Dr. Boo Nygren. President Nygren was elected President of the Navajo Nation in 2022. Upon his election, he made history as the youngest ever President of the Navajo Nation. Prior to his election as President, Dr. Nygren served as the Chief Commercial Officer of the Navajo Engineering and Construction Authority. He is a graduate of Arizona State University and has a doctorate from the University of Southern California. He and his wife, Jasmine, live in Red Mesa, Arizona. And I've had the honor of working closely with President Nygren on many of the issues that we will be discussing today, including exploring every opportunity to make sure that tribal households throughout the Navajo Nation have access to clean, reliable drinking water, but also cleaning up abandoned uranium mines and securing water rights for the Navajo Nation and other tribes and communities in northern Arizona. President Nygren, thank you for agreeing to testify in front of the committee today. I know that the committee is going to benefit from your experience as we discuss maximizing the investments made by the bipartisan infrastructure law to improve tribal water infrastructure, and also to get your perspective on what more that Congress can do to meet the needs of tribal communities. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kelly.
And I'll be back.
You bet. All right, next, I am pleased to welcome the Honorable Radhika Fox, former Assistant Administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Office of Water and current Principal of North Star Strategy. Radhika has more than 25 years of experience in executive management, policy, strategy, and operations. She has advanced policies, programs, and initiatives at the intersection of sustainability, infrastructure investment, environmental management, water resources, and environmental justice, and our economy. We're also joined today by Kathy Tucker Vogel. Good morning. Public Water Supply Section Chief of the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. She has over 30 years of water sector experience in the state of Kansas, where she oversees the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund and the Water Operator Efficiency Programs, Water Operator Certification Programs. And now, I think we're ready to hear from Radhika, right? And Radhika Fox, welcome. It's great to see you. And we welcome you and thank you again for all of your service to our country.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the committee. It's really a pleasure to be before you again. Ranking Member Capito, it's always lovely to see you, and it has been a pleasure working with you for several years now on a range of drinking water issues, PFAS, infrastructure investment, so it was great to see you again. Senator Carper, I just want to express my gratitude for your years of service, not only to your home state of Delaware, but to this nation, to the U.S. Senate, and to our environment. You are going to be deeply, deeply missed. So just 50 years ago...
Thank you very much. I'll grant you 5 or 10 more minutes to speak if you want.
Just 50 years ago, there were no national enforceable rules governing the safety of our drinking water. The drinking water that Americans relied on carried discarded chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers, and human waste, leading to high rates of disease among children and adults alike. That's why in 1974, Congress took bold action and established the Safe Drinking Water Act. The act transformed our expectations, and it saved lives and created jobs. First and foremost, SDWA has improved water quality at the tap by empowering the EPA to set national drinking water standards, saving lives and preventing diseases for countless Americans. It has increased monitoring and compliance requirements, helping us control emerging contaminants and stem potential threats to our drinking water. SDWA also established the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which provides affordable financial assistance for water infrastructure projects that protect public health. And it fostered transparency, requiring water systems to share information about the quality of their drinking water with the communities that they serve. The Safe Drinking Water Act, while many Americans don't even think about it, was truly a game changer in terms of our ability to protect the health and well-being of the American people. During my time at the EPA, I had the honor of working very closely with this committee to continue to make progress for the American people through the implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And I wanted to just take a moment to highlight some of our collective successes over the last couple of years as really an example of what we can accomplish through partnership and collaboration. Both Senator Carper and Senator Capito already spoke about the bipartisan infrastructure law, and deep appreciation to this committee for their leadership in getting that in place. Of the $50 billion that was dedicated to water infrastructure investment, EPA has awarded about $21 billion of those funds to states, tribes, and territories, and those resources are really working on behalf of local residents all across the country. Alongside the EPA, the infrastructure funding, we also developed a robust technical assistance program to do the very thing that you just spoke about, Senator Capito, to ensure that every community has a fair shot at receiving these funds. The Water TA program that was stood up over the last few years is now helping about 3,500 communities across the country in accessing these fundings. It's places like McDowell County, West Virginia, the Makah tribe in Washington State, with a real focus on building the technical, financial, and managerial capacity of these water systems. EPA also made progress on the regulatory front with a more protective lead and copper rule, establishing the first drinking water standard for PFAS, and other regulations. I'm certainly proud of all of our shared accomplishments, but we have so much more to do because our work will not be done until every single American has drinking water that is safe, reliable, and affordable. And so as we look to the future, I wanted to offer 5 priorities for our collective work. First, we must continue to invest in our nation's water infrastructure. EPA's recent drinking water needs survey found that in the United States, we have about a $384 billion need to invest in drinking water infrastructure over the next 20 years, not to mention the need on the clean water side. So we need more programs like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Second, we must modernize water management by rapidly accelerating the adoption of digital tools. You know, there are incredible technologies that exist right now to help improve water quality, water efficiency, and resilience. And the federal government has a really important role in raising awareness, providing technical assistance, and offering funding and incentives to help water utilities embrace these tools. Third, we must strengthen water management through equitable consolidation. There are over 50,000 water utilities in this country, and many of them struggle to meet regulatory requirements, manage costs, and maintain their infrastructure. Equitable consolidation can deliver real results for local residents if it's done well. Fourth, we have to adopt drinking water policy and investments to help communities weather what is increasingly called the water whiplash, this phenomena of shifts between extreme weather patterns, moving from severe droughts to intense floods and back again. There's a lot we can do on the policy side, flexible water use regulations, encouraging conservation practices, expanding water recycling that can help communities confront these challenges. Finally, across all that we do, we must improve outcomes for underserved and disadvantaged communities. Right now, 1 in 3 Americans struggle to pay water bills. What good is clean water if you can't afford to drink it? So we need to establish a permanent federal water assistance program to help struggling families. In closing, the Safe Drinking Water Act was an extraordinary accomplishment. It set the stage for decades of progress. And the clean and safe drinking water that so many Americans enjoy today would not have been possible if we acted by voluntary action by individual water utilities. It couldn't have been accomplished by communities and states working independently. We never could have developed and scaled a nationwide effort to test, protect, and improve our drinking water without the leadership and reach of the federal government. It's truly an example of the essential work of our federal government, what it can and must do to stand for our well-being. And so as we look back on the last half century and look forward to the next, I hope that will be our lesson and our goal. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today, and I look forward to the discussion.
We look forward to it as well. Thank you very much, Radhika. Thanks for all of your good work across the years. Delighted to see you again. I just want to say before, it's not every day that we get to welcome a president to our hearings, but this is an important subject. So, Mr. President, do people ever call you Mr. President?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay. I think that would be like a great perk to have. Welcome, Mr. President. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Please proceed.
Yeah, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito. Thank you.
Actually, believe it or not, she pronounces it Capito.
Capito.
Capito, yes.
Capito, okay.
I'm sure your name's been mispronounced a time or two.
Yes, plenty of times, except around Halloween, they're pretty good at it. So again, I just want to say thank you so much to the esteemed members of the committee as well, too. Yate, I'm Dr. Boo Niagara, Navajo Nation President. And the Navajo Nation is the largest Native American tribe in the U.S., spanning 17.5 million acres, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. We have over 400,000 enrolled members, half of residing on the reservation. Under the 1868 treaty, the United States had a legal and moral obligation to assist the Navajo Nation in addressing the challenges we face in safeguarding the well-being of our people. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on the 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which has been vital for ensuring safe drinking water for many, many Navajo families on the nation. The act enabled the Navajo Nation to regulate its drinking water systems, marking a significant step for tribal sovereignty and self-determination. The Navajo Nation's efforts to ensure safe drinking water began when the establishment of the Public Water System Supervision Program in 1991. This program laid a strong foundation for regulating and monitoring water systems across the nation. Building on this progress, the Navajo Nation formally adopted the Navajo Nation Safe Drinking Water Act in 1995. This legislation was made to align with the federal regulations, ensuring that all drinking water systems on the Navajo Nation met rigorous safety and compliance standards. In December of 2000, the Navajo Nation became the first federally recognized tribe to obtain full authority for implementing the Safe Drinking Water Act. This historic milestone solidified the nation's authority to oversee and enforce safe drinking water regulations independently. Today, the PWSSP regulates 26 water purveyors responsible for 171 water systems, providing essential oversight to ensure clean and safe drinking water for approximately 169,000 of my tribal members across the Navajo Nation. The program continues adopting new regulations, ensuring that our water systems comply with evolving safety standards. This includes monitoring and reporting on over 90 contaminants and addressing emerging issues such as arsenic, disinfection by products, and PFAS. The Public Water System Supervision Program has shown remarkable leadership and innovation in advancing the Navajo Nation's access to safe drinking water. One of its key achievements is developing a formal construction review program, which ensures that all water system designs, new constructions, and safe system upgrades meet stringent safety and performance standards. This program guarantees that water infrastructure projects are built to last and serving the needs of the Navajo Nation's communities effectively. Additionally, the program has implemented an operator certificate program to uphold the quality and reliability of water system operations. By providing rigorous training and certifications for our operators, the program ensures that those managing water and wastewater systems have the expertise to address the challenges and maintain compliance with safety regulations. Collaboration has been central to the program's success. Through partnerships with the Indian Health Services, the EPA, the program has significantly reduced contamination levels in several Navajo communities, including Aneth, Montezuma Creek, and Greasewood Springs. These efforts involve the construction of water treatment plants, the extension of pipelines to bring clean water to areas that previously relied on less reliable sources. Funding sources like the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act and the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, have been very instrumental in extending pipelines and upgrading infrastructure on the Navajo Nation. Despite progress in securing safe drinking water for the Navajo Nation, challenges do remain. Many communities still lack basic water infrastructure. Building pipelines across remote, rugged terrain is very costly and time-consuming, often hindering by logistical and financial constraints. Emerging contaminants like PFAS and PFOA require advanced monitoring and treatment and investments in technology. Additionally, transitioning to surface water systems to reduce groundwater reliance adds complexities, including staff training to meet regulatory standards. We deeply appreciate the support from Congress and federal agencies, which has been very essential in advancing safe drinking water efforts for our people. However, as demands on our water system grows, additional resources are urgently needed. We request restoring our annual grant funding for the Public Water System Supervision Program, which was last fully funded 11 years ago in 2014. With increases in costs since then, an updated funding level is critical to support enforcement, inspections, operator training, program sustainability. In closing, I urge Congress to continue supporting our tribal programs like the Navajo PWSSP and increase funding for critical infrastructure projects. Thank you for your time, your continued support, and I'm here for any questions that you may have on behalf of the Navajo Nation.
Good. Welcome, and again, thank you so much for joining us, for your leadership. Mr. President, and when is your birthday?
Christmas.
You're kidding.
It is on Christmas.
That is great. All right. Well, nice of you to join us, and thank you for your leadership, your input. Kathy Tucker Bogle, where are you from?
So, good morning, Chairman Carper and Ranking Member Capito and members of the committee. I am from the great state of Kansas. I am the Drinking Water Administrator at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, but I'm also here today representing the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators, whose 57 members represent the drinking water primacy agencies who work as co-regulators to protect public health through the implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act.
All right, good. Well, welcome. We're delighted that you're here.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
So in Kansas, I direct the programs that implement the Safe Drinking Water Act with oversight of about 961 public water supply systems in the state of Kansas. Are all predominantly small and rural. And I oversee the approximately 2,000 water operators in the state of Kansas.
How many people live in Kansas these days?
Almost 3 million.
Okay.
So the 50th anniversary of SDWA provides an opportunity for us to celebrate successes and identify approaches to meet our future challenges. The first national interim primary drinking water regulation, published in 1975, and I actually have an original copy here. Yes, an original copy of the Federal Register. It was 8.5 pages long and set maximum contaminant levels for 18 contaminants. So today, the most recent publication of 40 CFR Part 141, which are the drinking water regulations, consists of 343 pages and regulates over 90 contaminants. So you can see over the past 50 years, our workload's increased quite a bit. So primacy agencies and public water supply systems rely on 3 programs created in the 1996 amendments to the Safe Drinking Water Act. Those are the State Revolving Fund, which has been mentioned here today, and is the foundation for the implementation of our state drinking water programs. Since its inception in 1997, the SRFs have provided $57.3 billion in funding for water system improvements, and the SRFs have also provided $5.1 billion in additional subsidy through principal forgiveness on the loans, and many of these projects benefit small and rural communities. The second program I want to briefly review is the Capacity Development Program, which states have used to help small water systems achieve and maintain technical, financial, and managerial capacity, and has become an integral part of all state drinking water programs. And I just note that in addition, SDWA prohibits awarding loans to water systems that do not demonstrate TFM capacity. And finally, the third program I wanted to highlight was the fact that Congress recognized that a well-trained and qualified workforce is necessary for water systems to ensure compliance with regulations. The operator certification program consists of training, examination, work experience, and continuing education requirements. And those 3 are really foundational to the operation of our drinking water programs. Implementation of SDWA during the past 50 years has significantly improved public health protection. For example, the corrosion control requirements in the 1991 lead and copper rule have reduced exposure to lead from drinking water by 70%. One of the biggest challenges primacy agencies and public water supply systems face is the number and complexity of new and proposed drinking water regulations. I'll just hold this up again. In the past 3 years, EPA has published 4 final regulations and anticipates 3 more in 2025. Primacy agencies and water systems struggle to meet the implementation challenges of that these new regulations impose on our programs. State primacy agencies really rely on 2 federal funding sources to operate their programs. That's the Public Water Supply Supervision Grants and the SRF set-asides. Since implementation of the congressionally directed spending in 2022, the base SRF capitalization grants have seen a 45% reduction, while the PWSS grant allocations have increased somewhat, about 16% over the last 20 years. This critical source of funding for state programs has not kept up with inflation and expanding program responsibilities. Other challenges for states and water systems include compliance with Buy America, Build America, Davis-Bacon, and American Iron and Steel. The IIJA restriction that only allows subsidies for disadvantaged communities, workforce shortages both at the state and local levels, and cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities. Although the challenges are many, with improved collaboration between EPA and states, combined with enhanced support from Congress, we can continue to protect the nation's drinking water. There are actions needed to ensure the achievements of SDWA over the past 50 years will continue for the next 50. So congressional actions that we would recommend provide nationwide waivers for compliance with Build America, Buy America, Build America, American Iron and Steel, and Davis-Bacon requirements for public water supply systems serving a population less than 10,000. Allow SRF program flexibility to award additional subsidy to address compliance issues regardless of disadvantaged community status. Fully fund the SRF capitalization grants and fund congressionally directed spending from a source other than the SRF capitalization grants. Increase the annual PWSS grant appropriation to $200 million per year, and provide dedicated funding to address cybersecurity vulnerabilities. In closing, ASDWA and its members are working very hard every day to ensure the provisions of the SDWA are implemented in the most effective and efficient manner possible. On behalf of ASDWA's members, I want to thank you for your continued investment in America's public water supply systems and the people they serve. You will find more details regarding my comments today in my written testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you for inviting me to speak today.
Thank you very much for joining us, for your testimony as well. Our thanks to each of our witnesses. Great to see you. Some of you have come a long way, and we're especially grateful for that. I believe that we can all agree, folks, probably everybody in this room, probably a lot of the people that are watching us across the country, but I think that we can all agree that every American deserves access to clean, to safe, and reliable drinking water. And this hearing commemorates as we know, the 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, a piece of legislation that has enabled immense progress toward that goal and really helped to change the lives, improve the lives of so many people now and in the last 50 years. Would each of you share with us for a moment your perspective on the importance of the Safe Drinking Water Act for protecting public health, please? Radhika, please.
Yes, thank you, Senator Carper, for the question. I sort of said it in my opening remarks, is that SDWA was a game changer. It was an absolute game changer because it established a national framework for testing, monitoring, and treating our drinking water. And as a result, now 91% of public water systems are delivering drinking water that meets all national standards. That's an incredible statistic. Now, we need to be at 100%, but the drinking water that, Kathy, you and your fellow ASDWA members are responsible for regulating, President Megan, what you're doing on the Navajo Nation, it is because of a national framework that created uniform expectations that, we're still working to meet.
All right. Thank you for that. Another question, I think, for you, Ms. Fox. As our colleagues have heard me say time and time again, bipartisan solutions are lasting solutions. In fact, those first time I heard those words were from Rob Wallace, close friend of John Barrasso from Wyoming. And it was literally in this room. He was sitting right where you're sitting, Kathy, and he was there. He'd been nominated by President Trump for a senior position in the Department of the Interior. And he said during his testimony these words. He said, bipartisan solutions are lasting solutions. That's what he said. Bipartisan solutions. I think that's something we all agree with. And I think it's one of the secrets to our success in this committee. But the Safe Drinking Water Act is no exception to that. From initial passage in 1974 all the way through passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law last Congress, all of the major legislation that Congress has passed to protect drinking water has been bipartisan. And I'm particularly proud of the bipartisan efforts of this committee, especially the leadership of Senator Capito, to pass drinking water infrastructure legislation. my question for you, Radhika. How has bipartisanship played a role in safe drinking water protections, and what do you see as a future opportunity going forward for bipartisanship in this regard?
Well, I feel that I just have to start by thanking this committee for really being a beacon of bipartisanship on water and environmental issues. It's been truly, it was an honor of a life to be able to work with all of you for 3 years. I do think that the successful bipartisan action this committee has taken on water also reflects the reality for community and for people. Water knows no political boundaries. If you have clean, safe water, you fuel the economy. If you don't, it is a barrier to prosperity. Interestingly, Senator Carper, just last night I was reading a roundup of various ballot measures at the local and state level that were about water and conservation, and they overwhelmingly were supported by voters from New York to Minnesota, and I think it's because people understand that there is nothing more essential to life than clean, safe water, and I just again want to thank the bipartisan action of this committee because it really has been a beacon of how we can get things done for the people of this nation.
All right. Thank you, Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you. And I think we are very much all aligned in terms of saying the value of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And as we look forward, so I'm going to take a little bit different tactic on my questions here, since I have expert panel in front of me. So I want to start with you, Ms. Tucker Vogel. And then I mentioned this in my opening statement. Water systems often receive and encounter PFAS contaminants without producing or intentionally accepting or distributing them. Given the EPA's proposed PFAS designation under CERCLA, what would the impact be for water systems and consumers of the potential liability that this could place on local utilities that bear no responsibilities? I mean, you said you had 900 separate systems. That you've got to be obviously anticipating and thinking about this. So what is your perspective on the passive receiver issue?
So if you look at the memo from EPA on their discretion on enforcement for PFAS under CERCLA, it does exempt community water systems. However, I shouldn't say exempt. It says they will use discretion on enforcement at community water systems. However, it does not mention non-community water systems, non-transient, non-community, which are schools, those non-residential water systems that serve the same people every day. So the big one that comes to mind are schools. And so we would want to make sure that schools are also included in that discretionary enforcement. Water systems under the new PFAS rule will have to comply. So if they do have PFAS in their water, they will have to install treatment in order to be compliant with the new regulation. So funding will be a big problem. Now, we've done some preliminary sampling in the state of Kansas, and we're fortunate that we've only identified so far about 3 or 4 systems that have detections. We have one system, which is a military base, Fort Leavenworth, who has installed treatment. Of course, that's a federal government responsibility, so that doesn't really impact our small systems. But they'll be very challenged if we have to start installing this expensive treatment for PFAS removal.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a source of concern, I think, as we move forward. So Radhika Fox, thank you. Good to see you. Thank you for the nice compliments, and I hope you're doing well in the private sector as you've devoted 3 years to us and to your country. So thank you for that. But while I have you here, I'm going to ask you a question about something that occurred while you were in your capacity. On the safe, you know that this safe drinking level, this maximum contaminant level, was something that I was pushing constantly for. Set a level that we can understand, measure, and be safe with. But the Science Advisory Board was sort of questioned the processes that for setting those levels. They identified major flaws in the EPA's approach, like inconsistent inclusion and exclusion of epidemiology and animal studies, lack of predefined protocol, insufficient transparency. So what would your response be to that, and how can we improve upon, A, the processes, but also make this MCL level workable for the systems that Ms. Tucker-Vogel talked about, and also the president of the Navajo Nation is going to have to deal with this as well. Microphone.
Sorry about that. Rusty. So, what I recall from, one thing I will say, Senator Capito, having been at the EPA for 3 years, I absolutely agree, and I think, Kathy, you would probably agree with this too. There are vast improvements we can make to the regulatory development process, creating greater efficiency, transparency. So from a process perspective, I absolutely agree with you. On the question of the process that EPA went through to set the level at 4 parts per trillion, what I recall is that was very much, that was a recommendation that was made by the career staff experts who had reviewed hundreds of studies. And we arrived at the 4 parts per trillion because some of the more recent studies from when states had set MCLs showed that PFAS clearly causes cancer. And that is what really led to the decision to set at 4 parts per trillion.
So you don't really have a response to what the Science Advisory Board, the questions that they raised on the setting of this level?
I believe that there was robust discussion between the staff who were managing the development of that regulation and the Science Advisory Board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have to go to my other committee, so thank you all very much. Thank you.
And thank you for this morning. Thank you very much.
Well, I was going to do a big thank you to you, and I feel sort of bad I haven't, but I'm planning one. And it's going to be big. But I did name the bill after you and other things, but I didn't want anybody who was listening to this think that I, as the ranking member, do not have great appreciation and admiration for not just our working relationship, but our personal relationship with you as all. Both our native West Virginia roots, I think, have tied us together very, very early, very long. So I thank you for that. And you're just going to be amazed at what I'm going to say later on.
You'll get as much time as you need.
And it is my 48th wedding anniversary
Today?
Yes, thank you.
No, really? Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Charlie.
Tell him we said thanks for sharing you with all of us. Thanks, and thanks for your kind words. See you soon. All right. I think next is Senator Padilla. Senator Padilla, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate you holding this hearing to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is a bedrock environmental law ensuring safe and clean drinking water for all Americans. Mr. Chairman, earlier you referenced the right to clean water, safe water, and reliable water. I also want to add affordable water to that list of important criteria. In the very first hearing that I held as chair of the subcommittee on fisheries, water, and wildlife, we examined the challenges of water affordability, especially for small, rural, and tribal water systems. Now, unlike a lot of other types of infrastructure projects that receive federal funding, drinking water infrastructure is primarily funded by ratepayers. That's become the case. In fact, over 90% of a typical water utility's revenue comes directly from customer payments. But as drinking water systems face $625 billion in infrastructure needs over the next 20 years, what does this mean for working families, the working families that we represent, working families across the country? It means that many communities are facing water bills that are rising even faster than inflation overall. My first question for Ms. Fox, I appreciated your testimony on the importance of establishing a permanent water assistance program to help struggling families pay their water bills. That's why I introduced legislation to establish the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program. Can you speak more about why a national permanent assistance program for water is so critical?
First of all, thank you for your leadership, Senator Padilla, on this issue of water affordability. As I said in my opening remarks, 1 in 3 Americans struggle with the price of their water bills. And if you think about the fact that ongoing investment is going to be needed in water infrastructure, this issue of affordability is only going to increase. It was quite incredible that Congress established the LIWAP program, and that has helped hundreds of thousands of families be able to address, arrearages and water affordability costs. But more is needed. We need a permanent water affordability program, and I'm very hopeful that this next Congress will sort of pick up the mantle of your important legislation and get it to the finish line.
Thank you. And a related note, the increased cost is not just for the replacement of some aging infrastructure, the expansion to add capacity. It's not just pipes, it's not just pumps, it's not just new treatment that is needed to meet important safety standards, but ongoing operation and maintenance costs are something that is not often considered. But it's important to do so. So again, this milestone, this hearing presents an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to resilient water infrastructure. And the bipartisan infrastructural law should play a historic and pivotal role in helping us address some of these deferred maintenance needs. But the operational and maintenance costs is so critical to sustaining these systems, but often receives insufficient attention and funding. So given, Ms. Fox, that the incoming administration has already signaled that they plan to rescind unspent funds from major multi-year investments, can you speak to the importance of continued and focused investments in our nation's water infrastructure, particularly for ensuring the long-term sustainability of these systems?
Absolutely. If you look, Senator, at any of the mega trends in water, what we know is everywhere is becoming more water insecure. Scarcity is an issue. Making sure that our water systems are fortified in the face of more uncertain weather patterns. So it is absolutely a time to really double down on investment in water infrastructure. What I can say about the bipartisan infrastructure law, $21 billion is already out from EPA to states, tribes, and territories, like my fellow witnesses. That money is being put to work in over 1,200 local water infrastructure projects in every state across this country. Every American is really going to be benefiting from this. So I certainly hope that the incoming administration will continue to invest the second half of that bipartisan infrastructure law funding, as well as work in a bipartisan fashion with Congress to continue to sustain those investments. And Senator, I really see the infrastructure dollars and the permanent water affordability program as two sides of a coin that really can deliver clean, safe water for the American people.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, just in closing, I want to remind the members of the committee that we had this hearing, and the conversations we've had since are truly bipartisan. If you look at the rural communities that I referenced earlier, the lower income communities, the tribal communities throughout the country, it's not blue states, it's not red states, it's truly all of us. This is an area where there should be significant bipartisan agreement. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you as well. Before I turn to Senator Records, I just want to say a word of thanks to both of you for your faithful attendance. We were preceded here by Barbara Boxer, and my guess is if you choose to continue to do this line of work for the years to come, and I hope you will, that you may end up sitting in this seat. And if you don't, you'll have to share it with this guy right here, because nobody is more faithful in attendance than him. Senator Records, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for your work here on this committee. It's been a pleasure serving on this committee with you, so thank you for what you've done. And thank you to the witnesses who have come here today to share their experiences. Together, we celebrate the contributions of water utilities across the nation and their work to ensure access to safe drinking water. And we should celebrate safety. We should also expect to celebrate transparent and constitutional water regulations under both the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. Sadly, starting with the Obama administration and now with the Biden administration, the EPA has pursued implementing the unconstitutional Waters of the U.S., Waters of the United States rule, otherwise known as WOTUS rule. Put forward originally by the Obama administration and now by the Biden administration, this rule was predictably illegal. The Biden administration's pursuit of it has only hurt Americans. The legal ambiguity around the Biden WOTUS rule acutely impacts Nebraskans. Nebraska's economy is deeply tied to agriculture. It's about 20% of our state's economy. About 1 in 4 jobs are tied to agriculture in Nebraska. About 92% of our land area in Nebraska is dedicated to agriculture. Our farmers and ranchers are the original conservationists. They will protect the land, the animals, the water, because they want to pass that land on to the next generation. We've got farmers and ranchers who are 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th generation. And they depend on protecting those natural resources. They are stewards of the land that know their livelihoods and their families' livelihoods are tied to the health of the land and water they tend. And they tend to the land. Nebraskans depend to tend on the land. The Nebraskans depend on the federal government to give them clear and transparent guidance. The Biden WOTUS rule was the opposite of what Nebraskans needed. It didn't have to be so problematic. Congress gave the EPA clear definitions of intent. The 1972 Clean Water Act established navigable waters as waters of the United States. The 1972 Clean Water Act says navigable waters 50 times. Congress's intent could not have been more clear on what it was. It was very clear that this is what the EPA had authority to regulate. Now, I'm a biology major, not a sailor. But it seems to me the plain water definition of navigable is that you can put a boat on it and you can go someplace. Oh, let's look. Guess what? Merriam-Webster agrees with me. What does Merriam-Webster say? Deep enough and wide enough to afford passage of ships. Guess who also agrees? The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the Biden administration exceeded its authority under the Clean Water Act, all 9 justices. When the court is unanimous, I question if the EPA understands the Clean Water Act. Or maybe the EPA just does not care what the Clean Water Act boundaries are. Either explanation is embarrassing. Sadly, the damage of this rule did not stop at the Supreme Court decision. The EPA failed to issue clear implementation of guidelines after the illegal rule was struck down. Farmers and ranchers have to guess how to comply with the EPA. These guidelines are critical. Violation of the Clean Water Act can carry penalties of up to $64,000 a day. This ongoing regulatory confusion doesn't just undermine trust in our institutions, it jeopardizes the ability of hardworking Americans to pay their bills, feed their children, and care for the land and water that they have. And they love this land. Waters of the U.S. is just one example of how the Biden administration created regulatory uncertainty. Biden's EPA created similar issues with other rules under the Safe Drinking Water Act. They've added costly regulatory burdens for rural and urban water systems impacting Nebraska households. I am looking forward to a change in leadership at the EPA soon. New leadership will give farmers and ranchers, manufacturers and landowners a transparent and legal regulatory framework. And new leadership will increase Americans' access to clean, safe, and affordable drinking water. Again, I can't look forward to having new leadership at the EPA soon enough, given the regulatory uncertainty that this EPA has created. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you as well. question, Radhika, for you, but many of us are still grappling with the results of last month's elections, including what it means for environmental and public health protections going forward. Now more than ever, it's important to remain vigilant about protecting progress that we're making toward clean drinking water. Ms. Fox, would you please describe what you will be watching out for during the next administration in terms of drinking water protections? And are there potential policy actions that the Trump administration might take that concern you? Go ahead.
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. I think, as has been a theme of this hearing, the issue of clean, safe water, it knows no political boundaries. And this committee has been a shining example of taking bipartisan action to ensure that every American has access to clean, safe water. And I certainly hope that the next administration, the Trump administration, will continue the work, and that the next Congress will continue that work. I think, if you look at, for example, Senator Carper, the issue of PFAS, this is an area where you and Senator Capito have worked hand in hand on the issue, because PFAS affects communities all around the country. The PFAS drinking water standard that was established during the Biden administration really was initiated during the Trump administration. And so, while I certainly would expect that they'll be taking a look at the regulation, I certainly am hopeful that this is some protection from PFAS is going to be important for the American people. Same thing with the lead and copper rule. The Trump administration established the lead and copper rule that the Biden administration built on. So again, I'm hopeful here that even as refinements are made, that these protections are maintained.
All right, thank you for that. This will be a question for each of you, and we'll start, if you will, with Ms. Vogel. Based on all of your testimony, it's clear that sustained federal support is critical to build and rebuild our nation's drinking water infrastructure. The bipartisan infrastructure law that a number of us in this committee worked very hard on, and our staffs, has enabled us to make, we believe, considerable progress. But we've also heard about ongoing challenges that remained unaddressed. I've long said that the bipartisan infrastructure law was a down payment on safe drinking water, and Congress will need to take more actions to protect that investment. Looking forward, I'm going to ask each of you to summarize the key considerations for Congress to protect safe drinking water, and what should be in a potential future supplemental funding package for drinking water infrastructure. And where do you see agreement with your fellow witnesses? Ms. Tucker-Buckle, do you want to lead off with that? And then we'll go to the president, and then back to Radhika. Go ahead.
Well, if you go back to my comments about things that, from a state drinking water agency perspective, and the fact that drinking water touches everyone every day in every community, and it's the primary public health protection measure that we can provide to our citizens. So as far as congressional actions, the Buy America, Build America, American Iron and Steel, and Davis-Bacon are really a burden on especially the small water systems that we are primarily talking about and are primarily exist in the state of Kansas. So providing some relief, maybe some waivers for those serving less than 10,000 would be very beneficial and allow those small systems to take advantage of the SRF program and the other grant programs, the emerging contaminants for small and disadvantaged communities, and the grants for small, underserved, and disadvantaged communities, which are outside of the SRF programs, but still very important funding to help these small communities. And allow the SRF programs some flexibility in awarding the additional subsidy grants principal forgiveness in the SRF program, so that a water system that may be having compliance issues, say with nitrates. Kansas, we are seeing a real uptick in nitrate contamination. So they may not be a disadvantaged community at the point they're making the loan application, but if you start talking about a $3.5 million nitrate removal treatment plant, the cost of installing that treatment plant could very well tip them over the edge into being a disadvantaged community just by simply the operational costs and the water rates that would have to go along with that to repay the loan. So providing states some flexibility on how we assign additional subsidy would be very helpful as well.
Good. We've been rejoined by Senator Kelly, and while he takes his seat, Mr. President, we'll come back to you, President Nygren. We'll come back to you once Senator Kelly's had an opportunity to get settled in and ask his question. And then same question of Radhika. And I'll just restate that question. Actually, two questions are related. I'm going to ask each of you to address this. Looking forward, would you please summarize the key considerations for Congress to protect safe drinking water, and what should be in a potential supplemental funding package for drinking water infrastructure? Where do you see agreement with your fellow witnesses? We'll come back once he's asked his question. Senator Kelly, thanks for rejoining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Nygren, thanks again for joining us today. I wanted to ask you to expand upon your testimony where you discuss the importance of making sure that tribal communities receive not just funding for physically building infrastructure, but also for staff and training and workforce development to make sure tribes can operate and maintain drinking water systems. So first, can you expand upon what you said during your opening remarks to explain what types of funding the Navajo Nation has received in prior years to administer drinking water programs? So I'm talking about previous years. What were the types of funding that the nation received?
Thank you, Senator. As mentioned in my testimony, we currently receive the Public Water System Supervision Grant, and we feel like it hasn't been fully funded since 2014. I've been told that it's about half funded since then, and really to continue to roll out the Safe Drinking Water Act to make sure that that program is funded. We'd really appreciate that. The other funding that we've gotten to is the Source Water Protection Grant. I'm told that was about $200,000, around that number that we've received to try to provide some quality source water prevention for contamination as well too. And then the other grant that we received is to make sure that these grants continue to work together in partnership to have us continue to implement these grants, but sometimes the resources and the dollars we get are not quite enough. And the vastness of the Navajo Nation, we've got, as I mentioned earlier, about the size of West Virginia, 2.5 times the size of Massachusetts. And really to implement the resources that are needed, we got to make sure that we've got our personnel to be out in the community testing, whether it's well water, testing existing water systems that haven't been looked at in a long time. So again, the funding that we get, we really hope that we can get it fully funded and to make sure that we meet those demands.
Even when it's fully funded, do you feel like it's still insufficient amount of money to do the work you need? Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. As I was talking with our EPA team, that they haven't gone out and evaluated some of the groundwater systems that have like windmills that a lot of our people continue to use. Having grown up 19 years, I grew up on well water, and the discussions I had with EPA was, I wonder if the well water that I drank out of for 19 years, I wonder if it was ever tested. And so a lot of communities still use well water, spring water. Some of the spring waters on Navajo, they have had traces of uranium, but sometimes communities just need to drink water to satisfy their thirst. So again, I think that if we were fully resourced above and beyond what we are requesting at the moment, it would really help us, because there's still 30% of the population that still don't have access to clean, reliable drinking water, because most of them have to haul the water miles and miles at a time.
Yeah, I have a staff member who works for me in state that has to and who you know, who has to haul water every week. It varies, well, the frequency varies based on the time of year and how much, water people tend to use. Can you talk a little bit about staffing capacity and how the funds that we provide, help you administer, these programs, and why this is so important to tribal communities?
I think when it comes to the staffing, we are definitely using the dollars that we can get. But again, we staff them with as many people as we can possibly can. But as I mentioned earlier, we've got some personnel that continue to try to monitor as much as they can. But as far as the other resources that we've received, I know it's like the ARPA money, the bipartisan infrastructure dollars, especially with the Gallup water supply and trying to complete some of those resources. We've really been trying to implement a lot of those, working with our Navajo Tribal Utility Authority, some of the bipartisan money that has come down from Congress. We've continued to connect people to water on a month-to-month basis. But again, that's just using existing water sources. And I know at the moment you're championing one of our biggest water rights settlement at the time. But to really continue to build that out, we really need to have a really good idea of how much water we're going to have as we continue to build out some of those clean water efforts.
If you know, how many families are getting access via, piped water to their homes on average each month?
On average, I think the number that I recently got a month ago is over the past year we've connected about, I think it was about 700 homes over the past year. So again, if you divide that, it's probably I'm not as quick as you as math.
60-something.
60-something a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you, Mr. President, in a second. But Ms. Fox, can you describe what ways that the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Biden administration worked to provide additional capacity building assistance to help tribal communities?
Absolutely. So during my time at the EPA, we established the first ever Tribal Water Action Plan, which was the Biden administration's commitment to strengthen the nation-to-nation relationship with tribes, through the implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. And that Tribal Water Action Plan included several things. One was to invest more in technical assistance to support tribes, and I talked about some of that technical assistance work earlier. There was also a commitment to help an additional 100 tribes get a treatment estate so that they could also be setting their and managing their water regulations. And then there were several rulemakings that were really focused on better aligning the implementation of the Clean Water Act with tribal treaty rights. So of course there's more work to be done, but those were some examples of efforts that we partook in.
Can you think of additional resources you might need or additional authorities that the EPA could benefit from to help tribal communities meeting their drinking water needs?
I would absolutely agree with the recommendations that the president has already made. I think that we have well-established programs for technical assistance, for infrastructure, and we really just need to continue resourcing them so that we can reach more communities.
I think I'm a little bit over my time, but I just got one suggestion for President Nygren. When you come back to the committee, and the chair will be Senator Capito from West Virginia. I often talk about the Navajo Nation not being twice the size of Massachusetts, but being almost as big as West Virginia. Mm-hmm. Just for your information.
Okay.
And with that, turn it back over to Mr. Chairman.
Well, as a native of West Virginia, I would just say almost heaven. Almost heaven, West Virginia. Thank you, Senator Kelly. Thanks. You've been a great member of this committee, and it's been just an honor to have served with you in the Navy. We're probably the only committee in the Congress where you got two retired Navy captains serving on the same committee in lockstep with a bunch of Republicans and Democrats. Thank you so much. That's true. That's true. I served when they had wooden ships. And cannons, there you go. All right. Thanks, pal. Before we wrap it up, I just say, let's go back to the last question I think we heard from you, Ms. Vogel, and President Nygren. Well, I'd like to hear from you and Radhika on the last question, please.
Thank you. I believe that one of the things I think about when it comes to how do we continue to promote the Drinking Water Act and the Clean Drinking Water Act is to make sure that that as we continue to fund our efforts, as I mentioned earlier, the Navajo Nation still has thousands and thousands of people without running water and access to clean drinking water. So to continue to have that support from Congress, to continue to have that support from the EPA, from the Department of Interior, IHS, as we continue to partner to make sure that we continue to deploy our efforts to bring water to families every week. And one of the things I also think about too is to make sure that some efforts on trying to secure water rights. That's one of the biggest initiatives that we have on behalf of the Navajo Nation, is that we've secured some water rights in the San Juan River on the New Mexico side, the Utah water rights as well. But on the Arizona, we're still continuing to fight, because Arizona actually is 60% of the Navajo Nation, and we haven't secured our water rights for 60% of the nation as well. So that fight, I think that if we can continue to get that accomplished and really have a future that the Navajo Nation can plan around, that would be amazing to see, because as I mentioned in my testimony, bringing water on the Navajo Nation, you've got rough terrain, you've got rocks, you need trenchers to try to go through the rock to bring water to some of the western part of the Navajo Nation. So again, there's a lot of its challenges, but if we can continue to make sure that we can secure our water rights, that would actually help us tremendously.
Good, thank you for that.
So, Senator, I just want to appreciate you for this hearing, to take a moment to kind of reflect on our progress, because I think so often when we do this work, we're thinking about what's next. What are the challenges that we haven't dealt with yet? But if you think about it, 50 years ago, Safe Drinking Water Act, 52 years ago, we had the Clean Water Act, right? Two incredibly important canons of environmental regulation. And we've gone from human waste in our drinking water, we've gone from rivers on fire because there was so much pollution, to really, really incredible progress for the American people because of what this body, Congress, did, right, for the American people. And then I think about, under your leadership, Senator Capito's leadership, we got $50 billion, so another 50, right, at $50 billion in funding for water infrastructure, which is really setting the stage for the next 50 years of progress. I think we just have to keep going, continue, we don't always get the policy right. We don't ever have all the money that we need, but over the last 4 years, we really made progress. And I think it's time to just keep going, because when we bet on water, America wins.
Oh, I like that. Let me just ask one last question, and that is, is there any, sometimes I ask this question, any question you wish you'd been asked today, but you weren't? And then if there is one, give us the question and your answer. Please, go ahead.
So I didn't quite hear what you said.
At the, sometimes I like to say to the witnesses, especially when we have a lot of concurrence here, a lot of agreement, if there's any question that you wish you had been asked, but were not asked.
Question I wish I had been asked?
Yeah. So you could, you don't get this very often, but you have a chance to ask a question and answer that question.
So one of the things I touched on briefly were workforce issues, and I think it's very important to recognize we have workforce challenges not only at water systems with the graying of our water operators, if you will. Many of them are retiring, and the younger folks aren't really interested in working, in a public water supply system where you're on call 24/7, 365 days out of the year. Salaries are low. We have those same problems with state agencies and people that provide the assistance to those water systems. So looking at ways to perhaps support workforce issues, to help grow the workforce, to make being a water operator an attractive career for folks coming out of college. I'll just give you a couple examples. What we've done in Kansas, our junior colleges, community colleges, are going directly to high schools, trying to get high school seniors that may not be interested in going to college into the water sector work. The National Rural Water Association has an apprenticeship program. Kansas has done, I believe, about 19 water operators have gone through the apprenticeship program in the last 3 to 4 years. 9 of them have successfully passed their water operator examinations and are now out working in our small communities. So those kinds of efforts to shore up workforce issues and provide some support to expand our workforce issues efforts, I think would be very helpful.
That's good. I was privileged to serve as governor of Delaware for 8 years and chaired the National Governors Association for some of those years. There's the NGA has something called Center for Best Practices. Center for Best Practices, and it's a clearinghouse for ideas that maybe come out of Kansas, can come out of West Virginia, come out of Delaware, and we just share them across geographical lines and state lines, but also just the ideas to figure out what works and do more of that, and to make it easier to share those ideas. And what you've just shared with us is just another example of that. The President Nygren, do people ever mispronounce your name?
Boo?
No, your last name.
Oh, Nygren.
Good, I got it. All right. Mr. President, go ahead. Closing statement, anything you wish had been asked but have not been.
I think I can agree with Kathy. I'm glad that she brought that up, because workforce development on the nation, especially with the aging workforce and trying to continue to entice high school students to really pursue their trades and to give every opportunity so that we can have a lot more people working out in the skilled labor force is really definitely needed, not only there, but here on the Navajo Nation as well. So I'm definitely glad that question was brought up. And overall, I'm just very happy that this committee, as mentioned by everyone on this panel today, is just, we're very appreciative that this is a bipartisan support to try to get water to every American. And I appreciate your leadership. And thank you so much, Mr. Carper.
Thank you, sir. And the people say, what do you remember? The people in the future will say, what do you most remember about chairing the Committee on Environment and Public Works? And I'll say, the last hearing that I chaired. And they say, why is that? I said, the president was there. All right, Radhika.
Well, so as you know, Senator, I've been asked lots and lots of questions by this committee over the last several years.
Yes, you have.
I think the question that I wish I was asked is, what is your favorite quality when it comes to Senator Carper? And I would say it's your heart.
Thank you.
And I want to close with a story, which is, back in...
Remember, this is a PG audience.
Yes. Back in June of 2021, when I was confirmed by the Senate, I was sitting in my home, and it was in the evening, and a phone number I didn't recognize showed up on my cell phone, and it was Senator Carper. He was on the train home to Delaware, and he called just to say, congratulations, and I expect you to do good stuff. And then he said, because he had met my husband at my confirmation hearing, he said, is your husband there? And so I went and got my husband, and Senator Carper said, thank you for sharing your wife with the country. And then he remembered that my dad had come out during COVID to the confirmation hearing. It was the first time I had seen my dad in months and months because of COVID. And he said, is your dad there? And I said, no, my dad lives somewhere else. He said, can you conference him in? And then, I conferenced my dad in, and Senator Carper, I was like, Dad, Senator Carper is on the line for you. And he's like, what? And you just were so kind to my father, who, as you know, was an immigrant, came to this country from rural India, you remember that story about my father, that, he lived in a small village without running water, and that his daughter became the first woman of color to run the water program for the country, and you remember that. And so, Senator Carper, I just want to thank you for your service, for always doing this work of policy from a place thinking about people and with such a good heart. Thank you.
Yeah, you're kind to say that. Thank you very, very much for that. Speaking of spouses and parents, one of a real war hero, Senator Kelly and I spent a lot of years in uniform in the Navy, but we back in World War II especially, there were a bunch of true heroes. And one of those was Bob Dole, who ended up from Kansas, you may recall, as a senator here, and a leader, ran for president, and was extraordinary career. His wife, Liddy, was nominated to serve in a position that required Senate confirmation. And it's a great story. And they, I don't know if they were in this room and this table, but there's a tradition when the people are nominated for Senate confirmable positions that their home state senator might come and introduce them to the colleagues of the committee. And the story, it's a true story, that when Elizabeth Dole came for a confirmation hearing before the appropriate Senate committee, her husband sat next to her to introduce her. And he said these words to his Senate colleagues, Robert Dole, his words. He said, I regret that I have one wife to give for my country. I regret that I have one wife to give for my country. And he's passed on and left a great legacy here. But she's still alive and cooking and doing a whole lot of great stuff with her life. But remembers to your family, especially your husband. One of a lot of times members of the committee and my colleagues and I get thanked for our service and for what we do. People have been very kind to Ben Cardin and me and others, who Debbie Stabenow, who's stepping down at the end of this year. But I've been doing a number of interviews, like looking back, legacy kind of interviews, which are interesting and fun. But people ask me, what is my secret to success? And I always say, my sister and I picked the right parents. Picked the right parents. And not a lot of money, but good values and deep faith and hard work. And a real love for this planet and the idea that we have a moral obligation to protect this creation that we all call home, this planet Earth. And I think that's something that goes across party lines in this committee, and it's a good thing. One story, I've said it, and I've even said it today, but I want to say it again. It's one of my favorite experiences. People say to me, "What do you most remember?" And you're 24 years, and I said, I remember the night we were up all night on debating the Inflation Reduction Act, which actually has a lot of clean energy provisions in it that deal with water and with air and so forth. But we were debating up until, gosh, the wee hours of the morning, that legislation and the Inflation Reduction Act. We finally voted about I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning, and passed with one vote. The Vice President, Kamala Harris, came out and she presided over the Senate for the last vote, and it was 50 votes. She broke the tie, and I spoke to her after when the place went crazy, and people celebrating, a lot of crying, for different reasons on the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. But it's the law of our land, and I think we're finding that it's actually something that we can live with and do well, create a lot of jobs from for across the country. But I go back and forth on the train a lot, like Joe Biden used to do. But that morning I caught a train at about 6 o'clock. Back to Delaware. We were finished in the Senate. And I caught a train and headed back and got off in Wilmington. I don't know if how many of you have, like, in your state, Wawas, but we have them all up and down the East Coast. I love Wawa. And so those of you who are familiar with them probably love it too. But anyway, rather than driving home, it was about 7:30 in the morning. I was dead tired, but I rather than driving home, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee at Wawa, and I did, and got a small cup of coffee, and I went to the cashier to pay for it, and she knows I go there a fair amount. She knew who I was and was very kind. She said, I had a small cup. She said, your money is no good here for a small cup of coffee. That's what she said. Isn't that nice? Your money is no good here for a small cup of coffee. And I said, could I get a larger cup of coffee? And she said, no. Your money is no good here for a small cup of coffee. But then she went on to say this word. She said, you've been up all night, haven't you? I said, yes, ma'am, with my colleagues. And she said, and I know what you've been doing. And she went on to say, she said, I have a son and a daughter. And I want to make sure that they have a planet to grow up on and a planet to grow old on. Think about that. A planet to grow up on and a planet to grow old on. And she said, I know that's what you've been working on. And I said, well, I want to make sure they have a planet to grow up on and grow old on, and hope someday that my wife and I, we have several sons, but we hope someday to have some grandchildren. We want to make sure that they have a planet to grow up on and to grow old on. But I also want to make sure, I said this to the lady that morning, I said, I also want to make sure that your kids and everybody's kids have not just a planet to grow up on, I want to make sure they have jobs, that they can support themselves and their families. And as it turns out, we can do both. And for as long as I've been in this committee, 24 years, that's what we've been doing, trying to make sure that we do have a planet to grow up on and grow old on for those that follow us, but also to make sure that the economy of this country remains vibrant, and it is, and to make sure it continues to produce jobs at an incredible pace going off and forward into the future. Let me say to our staff members that are those on the Republican side that work under the leadership of Senator Capito, who has been a wonderful colleague and partner on so many different things, including today, to express my sympathy, express my sympathy that you have to put up with guys like me from time to time, but to express my thanks for our staff members that are here over my right shoulder. I don't see Adam. Adam, who's their leader on the staff side, to tell him that some nice things were said about him in his absence. And to folks on my left here, led by in part by Elizabeth Grace and also by I call it Courtney. Our thanks to all of you, and to members of my colleague who have been great collaborators for good. It's been a joy, and I look forward to coming back and visiting from time to time. And with that, anything else? Final housekeeping. I want to again thank our witnesses for your time and for your testimony, for what you do with your lives. Ensuring access to clean drinking water has been a priority for me throughout my career since I was little. My sister and I, little kids, lived alongside the Beaver Creek outside of Beckley, West Virginia, a creek that was so polluted you couldn't drink it, you couldn't eat the fish out of that creek. But my training as somebody who cares about the environment started right there as a little boy. And while the bipartisan infrastructure law is enabling considerable progress toward meeting our nation's drinking water infrastructure needs, there are still major challenges and opportunities that the Congress needs to address and must address. Today, we're able to learn about some of those challenges and consider what communities will need going forward to ensure that all Americans have access to clean drinking water. We heard, I think, important perspectives today, and there are many more perspectives that can and should inform this important discussion. And to that end, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record letters from a variety of stakeholders that relate to today's hearing. And so I would ask unanimous consent for that. Hearing no objection. That's my favorite part, one of my favorite things that I do as a chair. I wait till there's none of my colleagues are here, and then I make unanimous consent requests. I could ask for the moon, and there's nobody here to object, but I haven't gotten in any trouble yet. So hopefully I'll escape today as well. Some final housekeeping. Senators will be allowed to submit questions for the record through the close of business on December 4th, and we'll compile those questions. We'll send them to each of you, and we're going to ask you to respond to us by December 18th. Anything else? Anything else? No. With that, it's a wrap, and this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all.